So today we're going to start with exercise 222, and essentially what we're doing is we're taking what we've done in exercise 221 and we're adapting it for exercise 222 in an interior nighttime rendering. So on 221 we did an interior day rendering, but we started to install some of the lights in our scene. So I already have a couple things pulled up here and open. And we can take a, let me close that rendering here. I have my view set, I was double checking some settings earlier, to the exterior render. But if I go back to my set view here and I come down to interior render 1, that was my view inside. And so I can take a look at my building here. I have lights already installed. If I flip my view around here a little bit, we can look out toward the outside. And I think this is probably the best setup for doing this kind of a rendering because we can see the difference. If I were to render right now, I could go ahead and I could open and I would see that my daytime rendering and my sky is showing through the windows and my sun is actually coming through the windows here. So let me go ahead and do a quick render. And when I do these renders, I'm going to cut the time of the render out of the recording so that you guys don't have to wait and watch this render build. And then we'll see it once again as soon as it's done. Alright, so my rendering is almost complete at this point, but it's complete enough for us to be able to see what's going on. We can see, yes, that it is daytime. My sun is casting light and shadow into the room, and we can see kind of a quick rendering of what's happening. We can see that there is sky outside of those windows, even though it's a little bit darker than what we had before. So this is what my interior day rendering is looking like. And in this interior day rendering, we are seeing the lights, the artificial lights that we installed last class in exercise 221. But now we're going to focus on converting this over into a nighttime interior rendering. And so that involves a couple of important steps. But before we do this, the most important thing that we can do is so that we can preserve our daytime settings. We're going to go ahead, and I'm going to cancel this this rendering right now. We don't need to worry about seeing that. Let me jump back over here into my view, and we're going to open that V-Ray Asset Editor. There it is. And we're going to go to the Settings tab. And when we convert over to the Settings tab here, we're going to make sure that we save these settings as our daytime settings. And this is really important because we're going to want to go back to this particular file and re-render during day and then re-render during night. So by saving all our settings, we can really quickly jump back and forth between the two different styles of rendering. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this Save Disk icon. This is going to save our render settings to file, and this is going to be a VROpt file. And they used to be VisOpt files, now they're VROpt files. V-Ray has changed the file extension on us. And so I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm not going to save it into my HDRI folders. I'm going to save it into my folder with my master site file. So give me a second to get there here. And here we are. I'm going to save this as the master site day rendering.vropt. This is the fall of 2020. There we go. And I'll go ahead and save that. And that will allow me to reload my daytime settings and then re-render. So it's a way of preserving those settings. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this over into a night setting. So to do that, I'm going to use a night HDRI background image. I'm going to clear out the daytime settings. So I'll come down here and under the Environment tab in V-Ray, there it is, I'm going to clear off the daytime settings. So I'll right-click on the checkerboard pattern here and I'll say Clear. Likewise, under GI, I'm going to right-click and say Clear. That clears the two daytime settings out. And now I'm going to bring in my nighttime settings. So when I do that, a couple things. One, it's sometimes useful to see or to use one of the presets that I have. So let me open up, I have Chrome open here in the background. There we go. And I have two V-Ray night rendering settings on the website here. One is the basic night scene 1, one is the basic night scene 2. There are two different HDRI background images. One is this Milky Way, one is Moonlight. They're both working fine. I'm going to use the Moonlight one as my example today. And so I would download this Moonlight zip file. I already have that file downloaded on my flash drive, so I'm not going to do it in front of you. But I am going to pay attention to these settings. So first off here under the basic night scene 2, we have a refraction background setting of 0.25. We also have a GI skylight setting of 1.0. So I'm going to make sure I use those two on my render file. So let's jump over here. I'm once again in my V-Ray asset editor. I'm going to go to my background and I'm going to set an image for this background. So I'll click on the checkerboard pattern and I'm going to choose a bitmap. When that happens, it's going to ask me for that HDRI file. So I'm going to go into my OneDrive. I'm going to go into my resources folder. I'm going to go into V-Ray and then V-Ray HDRI. I've separated out my HDRIs day and night, so I'm going to go into night. And I told you I was going to work on the Moonlight settings, so I'll double click on Moonlight. I have two options here, moonlight.hdr and the other one is moonlightgi.hdr. So I'm going to choose the moonlight.hdr. I'll click open and there's that bitmap file. We're going to check a few other things. First off here under texture placement, I want to make sure that it is an environment and that it is a spherical mapping, which it is. That's perfect. Now that that's set, we'll go back to our settings. And then from here, I still need to set the value, the background value here. That 20 is left over from my daytime scene, so I need to jump back and double check. I say that the background should actually be set to 0.25. So I'm going to go over into my asset editor and I'm going to set that value to 0.25. There it is. And then under GI, or my skylight, the value was set to 1, which happens to be correct. If I go back to my settings here, my GI skylight should be set to 1. That's good. We'll jump over into my asset editor here, but I still need to load the HDRI file. So I'll click on the checkerboard pattern, and when I do that, I'm going to choose Bitmap. There we go. And this time I'm going to pick the Moonlight GI background. So we'll go ahead and say Open. And there's the background setting. Perfect. I'm going to confirm that my texture placement is set for environment and spherical. Both of those are set correct. We can go back to my settings. My value is set at at 1. So both of those settings are correct. The next piece of this is adjusting the camera. And so this has changed a little bit. We don't no longer address the shutter speed. We're addressing the exposure value of the scene. My daytime scene was set at 14. I may have to lower this to get good results, but we won't know that until I do a little bit of a test render. So I'll next move down to render output here. And I'm going to set my render output small so that this takes a little bit less time. Let's go to 200. There we go, and I'm matching my viewport, so my aspect ratio automatically changes when I set this value to 200. And now it's time to do another test render. So I'm going to click on the Render with V-Ray button. It's going to open the V-Ray frame buffer, and it's going to start its rendering. As I said, I'm going to pause during this rendering so you don't have to listen to this on the recording, and I'll come back as soon as the render has finished. Now I'm just a little ways into this rendering, but I immediately noticed that I made one major mistake, and that major mistake was I left my sun on in the scene. So that's the other thing, is we have to make sure that that sun is turned off. So I'm going to come over here into my layer stack, and in my layer stack, I'm going to make sure that that sun layer, there it is right there, is turned off. That'll turn off my sun, and I can now restart the rendering. So I'll come back to my V-Ray asset editor. I'll pick the teapot icon to render with V-Ray, and we'll start that V-Ray rendering again, this time with the sun off, and we should see almost immediately when that light cache starts that the scene is going to be a much darker because it's not going to have that the sun installed. And there we go, that sun is turned off. This is a lot darker. We'll let this run out for a little bit, and then we'll check the settings. Okay, so my rendering was able to finish here, and as I look at my V-Ray frame buffer and my preview, I can even make this a little bit bigger and zoom in. Now, of course, it's a little bit blurry, but I'm still able to get the general idea of what my rendering looks like here. And I don't think the exposure is nearly light enough. Everything seems very dark in this rendering. So before I move on, I'm going to make sure that I adjust that camera setting. So I'm going to come over into my V-Ray settings again. We can minimize the V-Ray output, or the render output for right now. And my exposure value, I'm going to change that value. Now I'm guessing this needs to go down, probably something like 12 or so, and we'll re-render and check that one out in a little bit. So I'll save that setting, but before I do that, I want to start moving on to some of the other things that we might want to add today during my render. So let's minimize that. Actually, I can close the V-Ray asset editor right now. And I'm going to save this view because I like this view. I'm going to go to Set View and then Named Views, and I'm going to call this one, if that pops up for me. There we go. I'm going to call this one, we'll go with Save As, Interior Render 2. And I'll go ahead and say OK. So I like that view. We'll save it as Interior Render 2. We can come back and re-render that one in a little bit. But we may find that I want to adjust and take a look at a rendering that looks at, say, this stairwell. So that's something that's important. The other thing that you'll notice right now is that I installed some art on the walls. And frequently people want to understand how I do the art. So I'm going to go through the process of creating that art in just a little bit. But before I do that, I want to talk about adding some additional lights. So maybe I want some lights that are installed under the stairs. And so far in this class, we talked a lot about our traditional spotlights, which you can see up here, that are providing can lights, essentially, recessed lighting down in my scene. We also talked about point lights. I don't happen to have any point lights. I don't have a lamp that was installed in the scene, but that was the other light that we talked about over the last two classes. But the third style of light is something called a rectangular light, and that would be something that would work really well underneath these stairs. So if I wanted the stairs to have a little bit of lighting that's hidden underneath the lip of the stair or the nose of the stair, I can do that using something called a rectangular light. So let's go through and let's walk through the process of creating that style light. I'm going to zoom in on my stair here, and we'll go back to my standard tool set. We'll look at my V-Ray tools here and look specifically at my lights that are available in V-Ray. If I pick the little triangle, we can see all of the styles of lights that are available, and the one that I'm going to choose is this rectangle light tool right there. So I'll click on that. The rectangular light tool is first going to ask for the corner. So I'll go ahead and start with that corner of the light. I'll come over to the opposite corner of the light. That's the length of the light. And then I'll come back to create this light itself. So I'm only going to come back to about the middle of the stair tread. So we'll come back to plus or minus the middle here. Let me turn on my midpoint snap. There it is, to the midpoint. And this right there is the rectangular light that I've created. Now I have a little bit of a problem with this. The direction, whoops, let me do a zoom and then S for selected so that we're looking right at that light. Makes it a little bit easier to work with here. Oh, maybe I need to do it again. Zoom, selected, there we go, like that. So I have this light established, but the direction of the light is pointing up. And in this scenario, I don't want it pointing up, I want it pointing down. So with the light selected, I'm going to go ahead and type flip. And when I type flip and then followed by enter, you can see that the direction value of the light is actually pointing down now. The other problem with this light is it's coplanar with the stairs itself based on how I created the light. So I need to move it down just a little bit. So I'm going to use the move command. And I'm going to choose vertical as my option. So I could type V or I can click on vertical so that I'm moving vertically. I'll pick a base point and then I'm going to type in negative, I don't know, 1/16 of an inch would be 0.0625 inches. And that drops it down just a little bit below the surface of the stair. And that's something that's very important. Remember, we don't want our lights to be contained within objects or coplanar with any particular objects. So I have that set up. That's good. Now we need to address the light properties. So I'm going to click on the Properties tab over here, and then I'll click on the light itself. There it is. Now these work a little bit differently than our point lights or our spotlights. And because they work a little bit differently, we have to treat them slightly differently. It's not as simple as setting the wattage of the light and calling it a day. That wattage is distributed over the area of the rectangular light. So we can't just assume that it's like a light bulb. So a couple things. One, I need to address the color first. So there is a color change. We'll click on color and I'll type in 255, 214, and 170 to get a slightly yellow light. There it is. And under units here, I'm going to change my units into radiant power, that's watts, but I'm going to have to test out this rendering to see if this is enough. So right now it's at 100. I'll leave it as 100. We'll back up a little bit and take a look at the rendering to see if it turns out the way we want it to. So I have that set up. I'm going to jump back into my view. I already had a view set for this view. It's interior render 1. There it is. We see that light showing in the scene. I've already made the sky dark and my HDRI is installed, so out of this window I should see good results. And I also, before we perform this test render, I double checked that, let me go back in here to settings, that my camera exposure value was set to 12. So with all of those set correctly, I'm going to go ahead and do another test render. I'll click on that render with V-Ray. And we'll go ahead and we'll start that render process. Now while that's rendering, I'm going to actually jump over into my base file, my retreat base file, the file that has just the retreat in it. There it is. And I'm going to show you how I created that artwork that's on the wall. And a lot of times this is a place to add just like a little hidden gem to your work. So there's that artwork. I actually have 2 paintings on the wall there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the painting. And like I said, I already created this particular painting, but we could create it just by creating a rectangle surface. So I'll go to standard here. I'm going to create a box corner to corner with a height. And so in this case, I'm just going to get approximate here. We'll do something like that. And then I'm going to scale this so that it's the size of a painting on a wall. So let me do a scale 1D. So I'm typing in scale 1D. And I'm going to type this distance. So this is how much it's going to stick off the wall. Kind of like a canvas. So maybe 1 inch. There we go. Whoops. There it is. So I've got that sticking off the wall by 1 inch. I think this one might be 1.5 inches, but you get the same idea. Then I'm going to scale it 1D again. And I'm going to choose this distance here. And so maybe that's, 4 feet. And then I need to set the height. So I'll do another scale 1D. There it is. And I could set the height at, maybe 4 feet as well. And so there's the painting. It's on the wall. I need to move it up, so I'll type move, V for vertical, and then maybe I'm moving that up so that it's 30 inches above the floor, and there it is. That looks very, very similar to the painting that I already installed, so I'll go ahead and delete that. But you guys get the idea. So that's just a simple box. Now we need to think about the V-Ray material that's going to go on that box, the art material itself. So I'm going to go into V-Ray, my asset editor, and again, this is in my retreat base file. And I need to create a brand new material for this. So I'm going to be in the Material tab. I'm going to come down here to Create an Asset. This is going to be a material. It's going to be a generic material. So I'll come up here to Generic. There it is. It's called Generic. Let's rename it. And I could call this, I don't know, Art. I'll put my name next to it, just so that we know it's there. Now, on this material that I'm creating, I'm going to expand the drawer out to the right here, and I want to load a custom bitmap on the diffuse part of this material. And this is where you could actually load, you could load a famous painting, certainly, but you could also load one of your own drawings, or something that is personal to you, and that helps make this rendering something that is a reflection of you. So let me open up my Chrome here. I'll do I'm going to go to Unsplash, because there's lots of photographs there, and we'll use one of those right now. Let's use this one. There it is. Let me download it for free. There we go. It's been downloaded. It should be in my downloads folder, so we'll go get it in just a second. I'm going to jump back over into V-Ray here. There's my art. I'm going to make a diffuse bitmap right here. So I'm going to click on that texture. It's going to be a bitmap. I need to go find that. Now this is on my Mac, so I'm going to jump over to my Mac, and we're going to go into my downloads folder. There it is. And that was something that I just downloaded, so let's go to my date, and there it is. Go ahead and click on open. And as soon as that opens, we should see, let's see, our texture placement. It's a 2D, that's perfect. And if we go back to my material itself, we should see that showing up. I'm not quite sure why it's not showing up for us, but let's go ahead and apply that material to my artwork. So I have that artwork selected. I'm going to right click on the material. I'm going to apply to selection. Oh, there it is. It just took a little bit to show up. So I have it applied directly to the selection. That's good. Let's switch over into my rendered view so we can see it. We'll give it a second to catch up here. It's really dark because it's not showing my lights just yet. It actually looks pretty accurately applied. I can just barely see it on my screen here. Let's go over into the properties, and this is where texture mapping matters. I could delete the current texture mapping. Even though it looks fairly accurate, I could apply a planar mapping to it. We're going to look here, first corner of plane. There's first corner of plane, other corner or length. I'm going to do that corner right there because we want this to be applied. And then we'll go ahead and press enter. And let's go ahead and take a quick look. Again, it looks like it's accurate. We could go into our properties. Oh, sorry. We'll do UV. And now it's been applied. And we could actually show the mapping. There it is. Looks like it's applied down. We need to do a rotate 3D on it. So let me do rotate. (3D) helps if I can type correctly. We'll rotate along the bottom axis, and then we'll fold this up so that it's going straight up. Let me turn on ortho so it'll jump up for me. There it is. And now that's being applied on my canvas itself. I used a planar mapping because I want the sides to just kind of blur. And we'll see that once we get to our render. So I've gone ahead and I've done that. Let me go ahead and save this file. There it is. That's going to save in the background. Let's jump over into my my master site file. We're looking at the master site file. You can see the artwork that's already on the walls from before, and we can look at my light that's under the stairs, and it's way, way, way too strong. So it's concentrated too much. We need to go in and we need to adjust that. So I'd come back to my light. It's still selected. We come in here to intensity, and maybe I'm going to drop that down to 30 and see if that works a little bit better. At this point, I would do another test rendering. But before I do that, we want to update the block file because we've done some work. We've added that other piece of art to this particular scene. So assuming that my file here has saved, which it says file successfully saved, I should be able to go back to my master site file. There it is. We can go into my blocks, and we can go to Block Manager. I have to be patient here for a second while it pulls up. And there we go. The Block Manager is pulled up. Took a little bit of time. My retreat base, the linked file is newer. We want to come in here and we want to press the Update button. So go ahead and click on Update. This is going to take a little bit of time, so once again I'll pause the video while this completes. Okay, so my block updated successfully. That did take a few minutes, so make sure you're patient and you let it finish. I'll go ahead and say OK. And now that that's updated into my scene, that's great. We can go ahead and do another test rendering to test. Oh, there we go. Now it's OK. To test that everything is rendering out OK and that my light is rendering out OK. I'm going to go ahead before I do the next rendering and save my work just in case. So we'll go ahead and go to File and then Save. And as soon as that's done, we'll go ahead and start another test rendering and see how it's looking. Alright, so I've gone ahead and I've saved, that's good, and now we can start that test render. So I'll open the V-Ray Asset Editor again, and we'll go ahead and click on the little teapot here to render with V-Ray, and we'll take another look at what this rendering looks like. Now, this particular scene, to me, still seems a little bit shy, or a little bit not composed. I think maybe a piece of furniture in here would really help enhance this scene just a bit. So I'm going to go ahead, while this is rendering, I'm going to go back to my scene where I have my base retreat here. I'm going to go back to shaded mode so we can zoom out here and take another look. And I'm going to think about a piece of furniture that would go in here. And remember, a lot of times in the renderings, the furniture is about staging your scene, not fully furnishing, just like you would if you were trying to sell a house, for example. So you'd want to go in and you'd want to stage. So I want just like a little couch or a chair or something here to kind of enhance that overall scene. I'm going to hide this mapping while I'm here so that we don't get confused later on. And in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and go to the First in Architecture website. So let me pull up Chrome again. There it is. And we'll navigate to First in Architecture. Oh, excuse me, Flying Architecture. Oops, flyingarchitecture.com, there we go. Sorry, First in Architecture is from my other class. And so now that I have this here, we're going to go ahead and look. Let's look at the store here. We're going to turn on only free, and we're going to look for 3D models. We're going to look at furniture. Let's turn that only free on again. There we go, and I'm going to look at what could I put in that little bit of space. So this looks nice. It's an IKEA sofa, that could work. Scroll down here and see if I like anything else. Yeah, maybe I'll do this one. And let's go ahead and download that. There we are. It's downloaded. Now remember, before we use any of these, I'm always a fan of opening up the file and testing to make sure it renders right ahead of time. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this file open. I have one other Rhino open. This is a nothing file, so I can go ahead and go to File and then Open. No, we don't need to save changes to that. This is on my Mac, so let's make sure I get to my Mac. Let's go into my Downloads folder. And this was downloaded today, so we'll make sure that the date modified is set to today. And that's bizarre that it's not showing up. Oh, it might be in a zip file, so let me go ahead and check. Hold on for a second. Yes, it is in a zip file. Let's make sure that's extracted. There it is. And in an ideal world, I would move this all the way over into my OneDrive so that I would be pulling it directly off the OneDrive file as opposed to my my Mac here. But for right now, I'll go ahead and open it straight in my from my Mac. We'll give it a second to transfer over here, and we can take a look at this couch. And there it is. Perfect. So I'm always a fan of cleaning things up, so let's look at the layer structure. We never know how people set this up. It looks like everything is on one layer, so all the rest of these layers are relevant. Let's select all of those and then delete them. Perfect. We're down to just the couch itself. And then we need to make sure that materials are applied that are appropriate. So let me open my V-Ray Asset Editor in this file. Oh, whoops. Looks like I need to set V-Ray as my current renderer. There we go. Now we can open the V-Ray Asset Editor. Maybe. Save this. And while I'm saving it, I'm going to go ahead and put it in my OneDrive folder because I'm going to end up using it as a block. So let's put it in my retreat file. There we go. And we'll go ahead and save it there. Okay, so let's go into materials. And looks like we need some materials. So let's go ahead and load material. I'm guessing we're going to need some kind of leather, so let's look at fabric and let's see if we can get some leather. Did I go past it? Oh, leather is its own category. There we go. Well, we'll try black leather and see if we like it in black. I don't know if I like it or not, but let's go ahead and put that over here in my materials. And then let's go ahead and select my couch elements. There we go. I'm not selecting the feet, I'm just selecting the couch itself. I'm going to right click and say apply to selection. And then with the feet, we're going to go into metal here, and I'm going to do, I think, some chrome feet. Let's do polished chrome. And we'll select all of those feet. I'm going to select them down here in the side view to make it easier to select them. There's all the feet. And I'm going to apply that chrome polished to it. So let's apply to selection. And there we go. I have those set. I may need to adjust the texture mapping on these, but for right now, we'll go with it. I'll go ahead and go to File, and then Save on this file. And then we'll jump back over into my, there it is, hold on. There we go. Into my retreat base. And we'll go into Edit, Blocks, Block Manager. And we'll load in that new, Edit, Blocks, Insert Block Instance. We have to insert it before we can manage it. There we go. And I'm going to find that file that I just saved. It was on my OneDrive. And there it is. We'll go ahead and open it. All of that's fine. I'm going to use the block definition type as linked with a referenced layer structure. Go ahead and say OK. OK one more time. And it should let me place it. Now I'm going to make sure that I snap to something in my scene that's on the floor level. And then I can step back and move it. Move it in the top view here. In between those lights. That's nice. And we'll move it one more time so that it's inside like that. Now that's a little close to the stairs, so I'm going to move it again, and I'm going to move it over here closer to that side wall. Let's go a little bit closer, maybe like that, and then let's go ahead and look at my render 1 view. So let me go to set view. I'm going to go back to that interior render 1 view. Oops, sorry, it's interior render 2. Oh no, this is not in the correct file, so it doesn't matter. We'll save this, and then we need to update the blocks back in my master site file. But in the meantime, we can see that that finished rendering, the stair's a little bit strong still. I think maybe it's a little bit less than that. So we'll go back again and take that stair light. There's my rectangular light. And we'll go back and we'll adjust that intensity down just a little bit more. Let's do it at like, I don't know, 5 this time. Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and save this master site file. We'll jump back over into my retreat base. Good. And let's make sure that one's saved. Yes, it saved successfully. Now it's a matter of updating those blocks again. So I'll go back to my master site file. As soon as the save is complete, I'm going to update that block, which is going to bring that couch into this scene. So we'll let that finish. All right, so it's finished saving. Now I'm going to go into Blocks, Block Manager. And once again, we're going to see that my retreat base file needs an update. So there's the retreat base. Linked file is newer. We'll click on Update. All right, so my block was now updated successfully. So we'll go ahead and we will close the block manager. You can see that my couch was now installed. That's good. Probably I'll end up cropping that a little bit because it looks like it's getting a little bit distorted at the edge, but I think it's worth doing another test rendering. So we'll open up that V-Ray asset editor. We'll go into my settings, we'll make sure everything's set correctly. My exposure value still seems okay. I've adjusted that stair light, so I'm testing that as well. And we'll start another test render. So in just a little bit, this one will be done. We'll take a look, make sure that everything looks the way it should, and then we'll up the size and render in a little bit larger format.